Let's be real civilized about this.
Okay. That's fine. Now, I don't want to have to hurt you. All I'm going to do is slip these cuffs on.
And no funny stuff.
I know how to use this.
Garbage day!
Huh?
No!
It's the Christmas gift that keeps on giving. And we are live and we are back. My name is John. I'm the host of the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. This is your weekly podcast about consumption and a bunch of other bullshit. With me this week is the host of the Dewey Pod Monster podcast, and his name is Sean. Sean, how are you doing today?
I am about a hair away from exploding with anger, but I'm all right. How about you? It's Friday.
So it's garbage. It's garbage day here. So,
It's always garbage day here.
I'm doing all right. It's been a unnecessarily long week for really no good reason, but it's Friday, and yeah, we're going to talk about a Nick Cage movie. But we'll get to that later. So, what have you been watching this week?
I have been traveling for work, so I have not watched much besides a couple episodes of The Office. I don't know if
Which
you have
one?
like I don't know if you have like a
No,
go-to.
which
Office?
office? Yeah, the UK or the
The
American?
U.S. one, the Michael Scott.
Okay.
I don't know. Do you have like when you go on business or when you're like you just got something to watch, you need to watch something? You have a show that you watch?
Generally, no, because the hotels I've been put in, unfortunately, don't have any like streaming options unless I want to bring my laptop, and I haven't wanted to because that's just extra questions going through security. So
Yeah.
it's been every hotel room that I've had has gotten at least Comedy Central. So it's usually a mix of South Park, Seinfeld, which is pretty regular for me anyway. I'm not a fan of The Office though, so whenever that's on, I tend to just kind of do a lot of channel surfing.
I feel like I only watch it when I'm traveling.
Does
Or
that
I'm
mean you're not
somewhere
a
that I
fan
don't.
either, or
What's that?
are you not a fan either, or
It's okay, but I saw it pretty much when it was first run, so I don't really feel the
Mhm.
need to watch it again.
Yeah, I tried really hard with that show. Like, I watched it when it was first on for like maybe 6 or 7 episodes. It didn't really hit for me, and then it had its renaissance when it was on Netflix, and like everyone kept talking about it. So I was like, well, I'll give this another try. And I got like a season in, still wasn't really hitting for me. And then COVID came around, and I was like, well, I got nothing else to do, so I tried it again. And after 3 tries, I was like, all right, I'm done. I don't care about this show.
The only thing that I really watched this week was when I was home. I watched a YouTube video. It was like, I think it was a Vice thing where this guy took acid before he went to a monster truck rally. And so it's
Sounds
called
like
like
all kinds
Monster
of bad
Truck
ideas.
Rally on acid. Yeah. And it didn't look like it was very much fun.
That's what, that title is enough that I would click on it without too, or at least bookmark it for later.
I'll put it in the show notes so everybody can take a look and they can judge for themselves.
I fell into the show Quarterback on Netflix, which is
I
8
did see an episode of
episodes.
that.
So only one so
Yeah,
far.
just the first one.
So I don't feel like this is really spoilery because it's not that kind of show. But I will say I'm a total like admitted junkie for that kind of television, just like behind the scenes with I don't even care what the sport is. If you're gonna let me watch athletes do their thing, like behind the scenes, I'm all for it. And the difference between watching Patrick Mahomes and Marcus Mariota is just night and day. Like I can see why one of these is the best quarterback in the league right now, and the other one is Marcus Mariota. So
Yeah, who is it? It's Mahomes,
Kirk
Mariota,
Cousins
Kirk
and
Cousins.
Marcus, yeah, and Kirk Cousins, like, obviously, I'm a Michigan State fan, so like I have a long history of watching Kirk Cousins, and he's not my favorite quarterback by any stretch. But again, watching that show, you can see why Kirk Cousins is I think he's in like his 13th year now or something like that. He's a career starting quarterback in the NFL. I don't think he's going to be a guy who can like be a top 10 quarterback, but you can see why he's better than the bottom half of the league and why he's a professional NFL quarterback. And again, then there's Marcus Mariota, where they spend like a whole episode like, this is my chef. He was my buddy in high school, and he said he was going to be a chef, so I hired him.
Didn't Cousins take over for RG3 in Washington? Is that where he got to start?
Yes. Yeah, he got drafted the same year as RG3. RG3 went second overall, and Cousins went in the 4th or 5th round, something like that, and was confused by it because they just drafted a quarterback number 2 overall. And then, as we all know, Cousins blew his knee out, or not Cousins, RG3 blew his knee out, and Cousins got starts, and I think he gave it back for a little bit when RG3 came back, but then he just got hurt again, and it went right back to Cousins, and he's been in Minnesota since. I know he got franchised by Minnesota twice, so that would be 6 years in the league because he wouldn't have had a 5th-year option, and so it's got to be at least 5 or 6 years that he's been there at this point.
It's been a while.
Are you searching it? Yeah.
No,
so.
I was doing something separate.
What?
Sorry.
Sorry. It is a good show, though. I know that the NFL is saying that they're going to do more of these types of shows with Netflix because they have some kind of contract with them, and I'm all for it because it's a very well-produced show. It's very well narrated. Outside of Hard Knocks, it's about as good as any like behind-the-scenes NFL show that I've watched.
Peyton Manning's the narrator, right?
He does like the opening, but he doesn't do the entire thing.
Okay.
So,
yeah, it kind of threw me because when they start the show, they have them all kind of talk. They do their little snippet, soundbite stuff, and then Peyton Manning, they show him and he starts talking. And I was like, wait a minute, is this going to be just a show about quarterbacks in general, or how's this going to work? And then, then they kind of drop him out, and he does his little intro narration part.
I know he's the producer on the show, so I kind of got the impression that they paid him X amount of dollars to show up for a day, record a couple lines, and then he was off to do, I don't know, Papa John's commercials or whatever he does. So,
does he do Papa John's? I don't remember what pizza he does.
Who's the chicken? He did that chicken parm commercial, which I thought was a Papa John's sandwich, but maybe I'm wrong.
I won't argue. I don't remember who it is.
I don't care. Past that, the only other thing I really went back and watched was the movie The Cable Guy, which I'm assuming you've seen that, right? The Jim Carrey one, Judd Apatow movie.
As being a former cable guy, yes, I did watch Cable Guy.
Yeah, well, I wasn't going to bring that up because we might get canceled for that. But if you watch that movie from the eye of like a horror movie as opposed to a comedy movie, it kind of adds a different layer to it.
Yeah, I mean, he's clearly sociopathic, at the very least.
It's a stalker, to say, again, very least. So, but yeah, that was pretty much all I really got into this week. It kind of been a weird week, and we're kind of getting right into shit if we go into that. Do you got anything you want to add before you just break into vampirism?
No, I mean, I had observations on New York, but I don't know if I need to rehash those. That's where I went for work. So
you had bagels the size of your fist.
Yeah, those things were big. Like you hear about New York bagels being the best bagels or whatever, and you get your little lender's bagel, and it's maybe like 2 inches thick at the most. And this thing, I sent you a picture. I had my fist for scale next to this bagel, and it was almost twice as big as my hand, like my clenched fist. It was huge, and it wasn't
I'm
the
Thomas's
only
bagel guy myself, but
okay.
Lender's is okay. So
I like that Lender's is in the refrigerated section. Makes you feel like they're a little bit more fresh than Thomas's, whereas Thomas, they just kind of sit out.
See, I feel the exact opposite. I feel like because Thomas's sits out, they have to be fresher because they're going to go bad quicker.
You don't think it has something to do with like the refrigeration keeps it fresher?
No, I think the refrigeration implies that it could be there for a lot longer because you're slowing down the rotting process.
The decaying factor.
Yeah. So, plus they have an everything bagel with Thomas's, and the best they have with Lender's is the onion bagel.
So I stayed basically right near Times Square. The office that I was working out of was near Times Square, and it's total. We're from Michigan. Detroit's the big city here, and you go out and drive through Detroit, and there's nobody on the street. Around lunchtime, probably you see more people, or along Woodward, or where the Quicken Rocket, whatever that building's called, Campus Martius. There's people hanging out there a lot of times. Yeah, there's little pockets of activity, but it was like one of my coworkers went running, which I'm not going to do that, but he was up at 6 a.m. He said he ran. There were people on the street. He's jumping over homeless people or weaving through people, just as many people out. We went to dinner the first night near Times Square. I walked back about a mile to my hotel, maybe even less, but it felt like about a mile. And I walked through Times Square, and it was just wall-to-wall people. There was stuff going on. All the lights were on and everything. It was just nuts. And it, whatever. I mean, it's a microcosm, right? Like you could go, if you went to parts of Detroit, if you went to parts of Chicago, Indianapolis, whatever larger cities are in the area, not that Indianapolis is a massive city, but it's it's a big city in Indiana. If you just got dropped into, like in Detroit, if you got dropped at Woodward near all the stadiums, you're going to say, I don't know what all these people say, all this bad stuff about Detroit. It's great here. Like there's stuff going on, but you go like 2 or 3 blocks either way, and it gets a little hairy, depending on what time.
Yeah.
With New York and being in that area, you go there and it's like, oh, it's so busy. There's always all these people out. There's a lot of homeless people. There's a lot of people trying to scam or they're whatever. It's hard to say, because I've only been to that spot. So you make a judgment call. But I will say it smelled like pot everywhere. Like, could not go
that
anywhere.
happens in Detroit too.
That's true. Yeah. Everything smells like pot pretty much. Any place
depending on the day of the week, it smells like that around my house. So
might be your house, but
it could be.
So. Yeah, it was just, and I asked other people that work there all the time, and I said, did it smell like pot all the time before it was legal here? And they're like, not as much, but it's crazy. You walk and there's just smoke shops, and I guess there's like a loophole in the city that just regular smoke shops can sell it.
I found that interesting the last time I was in Chicago. Like, it's not quite that available that like just any shop can sell it, but you can basically smoke it anywhere. Like, as long as you're not blowing it in some like 8-year-old's face, they don't care. So
yeah, they had a thing, they were talking about passing a law in New York when I was watching the news there, that you could buy it at concerts. Like they wanted to pass something that would allow you to buy it at concerts, but you couldn't legally consume it at a concert. So it was just like, nobody's going to do it. You buy your joint or your pre-roll or whatever, you walk in some stadium, nobody's going to stop you.
I might have mentioned that when I talked about going to that Misfit show, but that was the weirdest thing about that show to me, is they had people straight up with like cups of pre-rolls, just like it was a hot dog, offering to sell it, and you could smoke it right there. Seeing a comment here, Average Drewski saying, fucking NY City gave me legit anxiety when I went to see Meshuggah and Slayer. Drewski, that might have been because you went to see Meshuggah and Slayer. That's not exactly a relaxing environment.
It is hard, though, when you go from a place where it's like you're not seeing people like that all the time, and you go there. At first, the morning we got there, flew in, had to go right to our office from the airport. We left at 5 a.m. Got there, it's, I don't know, 7, 8-ish, something. Actually, I take that back. The flight was at 7, got off the plane about 8:39, took a Uber straight to the office, went in, left, and went to the hotel. And it felt like we walked 20 minutes. And the next morning when we walked back to the office, it was like 2 blocks. It was like, oh, well, it feels like it was 5 minutes. It was like legit because you're carrying your luggage, and it's really like, if you're not used to it, it could instill a lot of anxiety right off the bat, being like, I mean, it's funny to say like, oh, small town USA over here, but it's a totally different animal, when you go to a place like that where it's 10 times the population and a third of the area.
Right. No, I get that. I haven't been there in over a decade now, but it is wall-to-wall people is what I remember. It's like walking out of a Lions game or like a sold-out baseball game, but that's everywhere you go. So,
yeah, it's crazy.
All right. I don't got anything else to add. So, New York aside, let's talk about some fucking vampires, huh?
Let's do it.
All right. So, if you did not read the title of this episode, this week we are talking about the Nicolas Cage and Nicholas Hoult movie. I guess I should have worded that the other way. Renfield, which came out this year in 2023. I've been slacking, I realized, and haven't been reading a third-party review, so I'm going to get that out of the way real quick. This movie was given 3.5 stars by Chris C. And I like this review because this is a very interesting comment. Solid movie if you're a Nicolas Cage fan. Like an hour and a half long, gore and blood. Some parents left with their younger kids.
That's a good review. Some parents left with their younger kids.
Yeah. So
some parents left their younger kids there.
This movie is currently number 97 out of question mark, down from number 23 on IMDb. I'm actually a little surprised considering some of the stuff that's come out in the past couple weeks that this was still up at 23. We don't know when they reset this counter or we don't know how many this is out of either, but it seems like 23 for a movie that's been out. It's been out since Evil Dead came out, so a couple months now. It seems pretty high for this to be recent to me.
Yeah, and I mean we're talking about this movie quite a bit after the hype cycle has already died, but I think it's now streaming exclusively on Peacock, so maybe it's picked up a little bit more steam because of that.
Okay, that makes sense. So this movie gets a 6 out of 4 from people on IMDb, and there is a plot here. Sean, do you want to read the plot?
Yeah, I'm gonna just read the real quick and dirty on IMDb. It says Renfield, Dracula's henchman, and I don't understand this, inmate at the lunatic asylum for decades. Is that in the movie?
I don't remember that.
Is this a different movie? Longs for a life away from the Count, his various demands, and all the bloodshed that comes with them.
I mean, he lives in a hospital in the majority of this movie, but I don't remember any. Maybe that's gotta be just some random like fans interpretation of.
No, that's the top tagline. That's like the top storyline, top plot. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm looking at it, but I don't remember any lunatic asylum. I mean, the most insane person in this movie is Dracula, but
well, I think that the hospital that they inhabit on their arrival to New Orleans is technically an insane asylum. But I'll read you the storyline real quick. In this modern monster tale of Dracula's loyal servant Renfield, the tortured aide to history's most narcissistic boss, is forced to procure his master's prey and do his every bidding, no matter how debased. But now, after centuries of servitude, Renfield is ready to see if there's a life outside of the shadow of the Prince of Darkness, if he can only figure out how to end his codependency. And that's written by Universal Pictures.
I think that's a better description of what this movie is, honestly.
Yeah, makes a little bit more sense.
Did you have expectations on this movie ahead of time?
I expected, from what I saw in the trailers, which was plastered everywhere. They sponsored one of the UFC events that was up. I expected
they were for like 2 or 3 weeks where they had that all over the place.
I expected it to be very comedic focused.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. I thought this was going to lean pretty heavy into like and I say that it this way on purpose, like comedy horror, where it was going to be essentially a comedy movie with Dracula in it. Is kind of the sorry, um, H&H Bagel quotes here going on in the chat. Um, that's exactly what I was expecting. Was just very, again, just straight comedy horror movie. What this movie really is kind of it has elements of comedy, and well, it tries to, and it has certainly has elements of horror in it, but it's almost more like a police procedural comic book movie that happens to have Dracula and Renfield in it.
It feels very much like a buddy cop film with
Yeah.
elements of horror, with action and comedy. And I would think it's probably most action, some comedy, very little horror.
I don't think there's any real horror in this. There's gore in it, sort of, which is a major complaint that I'll have at some point in this conversation. But there's no point in this movie where anything feels creepy, scary, uncomfortable, even when maybe this because I'm too much of a Nick Cage fan, but even when Nick Cage is going very like Dracula or Dracula Cage, whatever he's doing, and getting to a point of being pissed, it's not really scary. It just feels like something's about to happen, and what happens is Nick Cage goes Nick Cage.
Yeah, and just to mention the cast here, we have Nicholas Hoult as Renfield, Nicolas Cage as Dracula, Awkwafina as Rebecca Quincy, who is the main cop that we follow in the movie. We have Ben Schwartz, who you may know as the voice of Sonic the Hedgehog. He plays Ted. It says Tedward. His name is Tedward Lobo.
You probably know him as John Raffio from Parks and Rec.
I
more than
prefer
likely
to say Sonic the Hedgehog. Thank you very much.
I don't. Okay, well, I'm going to bitch about him too. So
that's basically the main cast of the movie. We have a few other people you may recognize. Shorey Agdalashu. Agdashlu. Which
if you like horror movies, sorry, go ahead.
I just was going to say I'm not a big fan of hers.
If you like horror movies, you probably will recognize Jenna Cannell in this because she's the girl from the first Terrifier movie that makes it about halfway through. And honestly, I feel like she's horribly underused in this movie. Like she's very, very briefly in it, but it's one of the higher billings on this by IMDb standards. Do you have any opinion on Nicholas Hoult, or have you seen much of him before this?
I mean, Mad Max.
Is he in Mad? Oh, he is in Mad Max. Okay, I forgot about that. My biggest thing I remember him from before this was The Menu that just came out last year, which he's pretty good at being a shithead in that. You'd actually probably like that. I think I said it was too highbrow of a movie for what we do.
A little too artsy.
I think it's just a little too actual good, not just like the type of good we talk about. So, but he feels like he's kind of, to me, getting typecast into any sense.
You froze up. I didn't hear a word you said. He gets typecast into
being kind of a British whiny guy.
Yeah, I could see that definitely in this movie. He has that. That's pretty much what he does the whole movie.
So this really is his movie though to carry, and I gotta say, it's interesting how they. Again, the movie's called Renfield, so you shouldn't expect Dracula to be the main character. But I noticed a lot of the marketing around this is really Nick Cage heavy, which as it should be, because if Nick Cage isn't in this movie, I don't know if I can make it through this movie.
Yeah, it did really feature a lot of Nick Cage in the marketing, and you would think from those trailers, from all that marketing stuff, that he's going to be like a real main component of this movie. But I feel like all the articles and things that were written leading up to the movie really kind of made it feel like he was going to be more of a character rather than, I mean, the big deal was Nick Cage plays Dracula. And I feel like the trailers played that up, but you almost had to read between the lines to see that he was the hook that was supposed to bring people in, and he wasn't actually going to be that big of a character. But it's kind of shady that all the trailer stuff would make you think that he's a huge part.
Well, and I guess I'm going to cut to the chase, and we'll circle around and talk about other stuff with it. But he's the reason to watch this movie. Like, he is, at least in my opinion, not only the most, but the really only interesting part of this entire film. And he does Nick Cage things, but he does it under the guise of Dracula. Even the opening scene in this, where they essentially reshoot the Bela Lugosi Dracula, is one of my favorite parts of the entire movie. And they were just redo several scenes with Nick Cage in place of Bela Lugosi, and it looks fantastic. Like it is something you can see that, I don't know, 15 seconds that they put in the movie and say, I want a shot for shot remake of that with Nick Cage. Like, I would pay to see that right now without too much argument.
I'd agree. That was super impressive to see that. And it was cool that they, like you said, they filmed it just like it could be spliced in with that original footage, and you wouldn't really have known the difference other than knowing, Nick Cage and Nicholas Hoult are obviously not in the original movie, but they even did that that famous, like, iconic scene where they do that lighting across Bela Lugosi's eyes, and they do
the stairway scene with the giant spider web, and
they do that actually with Nick Cage being Dracula. They do that eye effect, not so much black and white, but they do that a few times. There was one thing I feel like there's a reason now that Nicolas Cage tries to have a beard in a lot of these movies, because his face, like, I don't know if it was an effect or just that he's all jowly and old now, but they gave this real, like, weird, like, my beard is cut into the same kind of shape that Nicolas Cage's face actually is. It feels like
your beard has more body than Nicolas Cage's face.
Yeah. He reminded me, when Roger Ebert had that jaw cancer and they, like, basically removed his bottom jaw, and it was just like that flap. That's what his lip and lower face to me reminded me of. Just this puckering look to him. It was just it looked really weird.
I wonder if, I don't know how much, or if, because I can't think of a movie that Nick Cage is in without a beard other than this recently, but he actually had his teeth filed down to make the prosthetics for the Dracula things fit in his mouth for this movie, which, one, fucking A, Nick Cage, like, do you, man. Two, the fact that he did that for a movie that he's not the lead in is also equally impressive.
Do you have proof?
I saw like several different articles that pulled it up. If you Google Nick Cage teeth in Renfield, there's like 4 different articles that pop up like right away.
Why is the gum to tooth ratio so massive? Like, why is he so gummy if he had his teeth supposedly fine? I don't believe it. I don't buy it.
It's from the effects people. It was an interview with the effects people, and I'll send you the link. We can put it in the notes for this. But what I don't understand about him doing that, although if let's just say for the sake of argument that it's true, it's Nick Cage and it's amazing. What?
I just don't believe it.
Okay. So, why would that be the one thing that we choose to go practical effects on in basically this entire movie?
I can't get over he's so gummy. Like, you see his gums the entire movie. He speaks generally pretty well, except that he has the sharp teeth in his mouth, so I can understand he has a little bit of a lispy kind of S-y speech thing going on, but I don't know. I just feel like, like you said, why would this be the thing, that the hill he's going to die on for this movie?
So this is in the New York Post.
Oh, the headline, totally credible newspaper, the New York Post.
Okay, fine. I'll find a different one with the same fucking article. Would you prefer People Magazine?
Article, that's not. There's no proof there.
You got to prefer People Magazine.
You got to cite some fact. Oh, okay, People Magazine. Now that you have people in there,
how about Forbes
behind it? What?
Forbes?
Sure.
I don't know why Forbes is covering this. Nicolas Cage really sunk his teeth into Dracula. Forbes. Blah, blah, blah. Nicolas Cage shaved down his teeth to play Dracula. Anyway. Yeah, why is that the one effect that you chose to go practical on, where you can't do anything else practical in this entire fucking movie? Um, so what else did we like in this movie? Did you like other things in this movie other than the intro?
Was there anything other than the intro that you enjoyed about this movie? I actually thought a lot of the action scenes, while being matrixy and kind of wire kung fu feeling, were really well done. I mean, this movie has so many action pieces that move it along. I like the action scenes. I thought that the scene inside that club when they're trying to track down a killer, no spoilers on that little piece. Aquafina, the gunplay and everything. She can't miss anything, but she can only miss when it like is the important characters, like all the side characters that have their faces covered, you can't see, get like plugged away and can't miss a shot, no reloading, any of that stuff. But when it's like Ben Schwartz, who is the main villain other than Dracula, when it comes to shooting towards him, they can't hit him for some reason. But no, I really like the action. I thought that without the action, I don't know what they would have done inside this movie.
I hated the action sequences in
Really?
this movie. I found them to be uninspired and repetitive. It felt like just another comic book or Matrix movie, which, as I'm saying this, and as I wrote this in my notes too, that it's uninspired, that it was boring, and it just felt really formulaic. But I also was like, yeah, but how do I like fighting when fucking Steven Seagal's fat ass does it against like a chair or something? I don't know. But I found him just to feel really forced. It seemed unbelievable to me that Nicholas Hoult is doing like kung fu and all this wiry type ninja shit through the entire fucking movie. I never really like whenever they go into one of these action sequences, it's the same thing that I've seen or that we've seen a billion times. And I'm saying in comic book movies a lot because that's the way it felt to me. It's the same choreography as like a Captain America movie, or pick your favorite hero, whichever one goes and wrestles the big troll monster. It's essentially the same dance that they do. There's just a lot of blood splatter that comes out of it. And now that I'm on it, I'll just go ahead and say it since I've been dancing around it. How come every time blood splatters in the direction of the character that is making the blood splatter, it never sticks on the character? Like there's a scene where Aquafina literally shoots a guy in the stomach, maybe 6 inches away from her. You watch blood splatter directly behind her, so the blood is coming towards her as it should, and it's CGI blood, which looks bad enough as it is, but it's what it is. So the blood comes at her, and then they cut to the next scene maybe a second later as the body is still falling down from where she shot it. She's clean. No blood on her, no blood around her, nothing. Just done.
I want to add on to that, but I want to come back around afterwards to the Nicholas Hoult action-y, I don't believe he can do this kind of point that you made. I noticed in this movie, and it was throughout the entire thing, I actually thought the digital blood looked pretty good for it being digital blood, for it being, it looked better than Winnie the Pooh. It looked better than, which isn't saying much, but I thought it looked better than Cocaine Bear. The one thing, the scene where they're in the apartment complex and there's that open courtyard and all the cars, and the guy that gets shot in the stomach. What's that?
Yeah. Same scene I was talking about.
Yeah. The guy gets shot in the stomach and he like stomps the guy like on the car.
Yeah.
The thing that I noticed was that the blood showed up obviously afterwards because they had to apply it to their costuming if they showed it at all. But blood was spraying everywhere from the characters. Like he's ripping people's arms off. Blood's flying all over the place. And blood never gets on the walls. It never sticks anywhere. Like it just kind of, it obviously flies up because it's just an effect. But it never goes anywhere. It just kind of disappears or whatever. Like within the next scene, it's gone. To wrap back around, I feel like Renfield, who is played by Nicholas Hoult, has the power, has a small percentage of the power that Dracula has. So I can totally believe that he's doing all this wire foo and he's flying around. He's able to like dive and jump all these long distances. He can punch people's heads off. Okay, whatever. I believe all that stuff. With all that wire foo, this movie, the action scenes in this movie are a better Matrix Resurrections than Matrix Resurrections was. Like, it has all the Matrix effects except for bullet time, stuff like that. This would have been such a better, like, all the effects in this were so much better than the new Matrix movie. I feel like the Matrix is like a benchmark that we put all these things up to, but it's so old that, you know, nowadays it means nothing. Like, we've moved on from that.
I would agree with that statement, that it was better than Matrix, whatever the last one was. There's actually a point in this one where you find out that John Ralphio is now a familiar, and basically all of these, what are the Lobos or whatever they're calling them?
Yeah.
The crime family. They're basically all familiars for Dracula in this. And there's a scene in the second Matrix movie, again, I can never remember what the R words are that they put on each one of the sequels, but the second one, where Neo's in like a big, he's at the bottom of like two big stairways, and you see the vampires and the werewolves and whatever, they all jump off. Yeah, all of them. The whole Universal crew, they all jump off of the different staircase, and it's like one of the bigger choreographed scenes. I think it's right around the same time as the big car chase scene in that movie. The actual choreography and fight scene, it almost feels like one for one identical to that scene from the second Matrix movie, except you're adding ludicrous amounts of blood that are spraying up and then disappearing.
Yeah, I think the one thing the Matrix movies didn't do that this movie does is all the blood. I think that's like the one. I don't remember. I mean, they're all programs, right? So they would explain not having any blood.
I remember a little bit of, well, I don't remember it on the programs, but I remember Neo bleeding a couple times.
Yeah.
I want to say Trinity did too, but yeah, I don't think any of the bad guys had any blood.
Yeah,
or
agreed.
at least not
anyways,
excessive blood. Yeah, tangent done.
Matrix.
So, yeah, we already talked about the fourth one. I hate John Ralphio in this movie. Ben Schwartz, I fucking hate him. I hate him in pretty much every show, including Parks and Rec. And I really wish he was.
Hedgehog?
I haven't seen Sonic the Hedgehog.
You should.
I didn't like the games. I don't have kids. Do I really need to?
Yeah.
I like Jim Carrey.
Well, there you go. There's your selling point.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I hate Ben Schwartz, and this movie does absolutely nothing to make me like him. In fact, it only makes me hate him more.
Well, I think that's fine, though, because he's a hateable character in this movie. I mean, he acts like a tough guy. He gets confronted, and he pretty much admits
he's like the
figurehead.
He's a pussy-ass, like, rich boy who gets arrested and gets bailed out by his mom and calls his mom every time he gets in shit.
I didn't realize this movie would have so much social commentary.
I wouldn't call it that. I think he just sucks.
I think the movie did its job. You're actively angry about Ben Schwartz.
And I'm often actively angry about Ben Schwartz. So, what else did you like about this movie? Before we go on like a Nick Cage love affair. So,
yeah, I mean, I thought that the effects, the Dracula effects at the beginning of the movie, there's a scene where he gets burnt up by getting in sunlight. And I didn't understand how far back that had happened, because when we rejoin him in current time, he is all just
looks pretty gnarly.
Decayed. Yeah, he looks, but the effect looks amazing. And I couldn't tell if it was practical, which I think it probably was, or digital, but it looked great. Like, I thought the smoke effects when he would transform from being Dracula to smoke, or to the bats, or to whatever he would turn into, looked great. I thought overall, other than the digital blood, I thought the effects, I would say 90% of the effects other than the digital blood, which I can't even think of what other ones there were besides the makeup and these transformation effects, looked great. I thought it was a real showpiece for that.
I had questions about the timeline between when we see Dracula get all burned up and when we get to modern day New Orleans too. Because with how like decayed he is, in that when they first show him after that, it kind of implies that it hasn't been all that long. Because once he starts like feeding on people in this movie, he starts looking pretty good. Like, he's like Con Air Nick Cage. Well, maybe not Con Air because his hair's not long. He's like the Rock Nick Cage in a matter of like 10 minutes.
I also liked a lot of I thought it was legit pretty funny. There were a lot of funny parts. I liked the recurring ska joke that kept going on, which I thought that you
Yeah,
might actually dig that.
I dig more that they said by name a couple, like a local band from here in Mustard Plug. Like
Yeah.
I'm a fan of them, have been forever. They said by name Voodoo Glow Skulls, which is not a local band, but a band that I've been a fan of for a long time. I was fine with that. Like I didn't mind the ska jokes at all. In fact, I think it's kind of funny that they made that specific of a ska joke or jokes in the movie, and it felt kind of right in the movie. Like I had no problem with that at all. So
The
I
first
did
couple
feel a
bad
little
guys are ska, like aficionados. They go up to
right.
the building, the warehouse or whatever, and they're like, "Is that a threat or whatever that was spray
Yeah.
painted on the wall?" And they're like, "No, I think that's lyrics to a ska song."
No, I'm not sure if it is or not, but I did feel a little targeted. I was like, wow, this directly like going at the ska references. Okay, so do we got anything else we want to go on before I just go on about how much I love Nick Cage in this movie?
Why don't you tell me about your love of Nick Cage?
So this movie for me is its saving grace is 100% Nick Cage. The costuming on Nick Cage, his mannerisms, the points where he kind of loses it and goes full on like coke addict Nick Cage or a little bit of like Raising Arizona Nick Cage. His just wonderful ability to kind of hold back just enough and be just fucking crazy enough. It's just chef's kiss. This is what I want. I want a. I'm sure I'm not the only person to say this. I got to think everyone who's seen this movie has said the same thing. I want a full Nick Cage Dracula movie. I want several of them. I don't think we're going to get it because this movie didn't do very well, but I would love to see Nick Cage reprise this character multiple times for a franchise. And again, I don't think we're going to get it. Watching him in that little studio apartment get confused by these affirmations and whatnot from Renfield is just utterly comic gold. Side note from that, the paint job that Renfield gave his apartment is pretty funny. It looks very Barbie-esque, which I'm assuming was on purpose. Yeah, to me, this movie, there's a lot of stuff I didn't like about this movie, and frankly, there's a lot of stuff that kind of pulled me out of it. The comedy doesn't land for me. I don't find, with the exception of the ska jokes, I don't find the majority of the things very funny. I don't really give a shit about the police story or really any of the time that Nicolas Cage isn't on screen. I have a hard time really caring about anything that's going on. But when Nick Cage is on screen, I'm 100% invested and I'm enjoying myself at those parts of the movie.
I got to say this. If you don't laugh at the line when the cops are going into the club and the cop says, "Can you order me a number 3? The toilet just ordered me a number 2." You're dead inside. Like there is something wrong with
I'm
you.
dead inside.
You are. Clearly.
I'm
You don't
clearly
like
dead.
to
That's what
laugh.
happens when you listen to ska.
You don't like to laugh. You don't enjoy the finer things in life. A good toilet joke goes a long way with me. I thought the comedy was all right. I didn't have a problem with it. I thought it was actually, I don't know if I wouldn't label the movie a comedy. And if you don't like Aquafina, which I think there's a lot of people that are not on the fence of, I don't know, on the side of the fence, I guess, of liking Aquafina, because I generally don't. She just plays the same character in every movie. She has that same affectation, like the New York City affectation, I feel like, in every movie.
What else is she in? Because she didn't really do anything for me in this, like to make me feel like I need to seek her out. But is she in? Well, I guess I'm looking right at it. I can pull it up. There's nothing about her that really stands out. I didn't see Ocean's 8. I didn't see Crazy Rich Asians. I didn't see The Little Mermaid or The Farewell. These are top 4 movies that are on her IMDb. So
I mean, you can't say, I don't know. You can't say you like her or didn't if you haven't seen any of those movies, but
that's fair.
I mean, she did a lot of voice work. Just her character. I've seen her in stuff. I have not been impressed. I don't hate her, but
oh yeah, I don't hate her. I wouldn't go as far to say that I'm a fan of hers. Obviously,
no. And I would think that if you are not a fan of hers, you will not like this movie because she is featured very heavily in it.
I would say this movie doesn't change your mind. I honestly think there's two types of people that are going to genuinely like this movie, because I don't think the story that they go for really does enough to drive this movie like above its actors. I think it's going to be the actors that save it, and those two actors are really Nicolas Cage and Nicholas Hoult. I don't have a problem with the character of Renfield in this movie. I think he's fine. I don't think he's written particularly well. There's moments where he's a little obnoxious to me, but I can see why a lot of people can and would like him. Or the obvious is Nicolas Cage, who is in it just enough to make this movie enjoyable.
I had to burp.
Like how you did it, then clarified it. So
yeah. There was that moment of awkward silence there that just can't live with.
That's fine. So, am I wrong on that though? Like honestly, I think the two lead. Well, is Nicolas Cage the lead? I don't know. The two male leads, I think, are what carry this movie, based off the strength of them being good actors, and the rest of the movie is just kind of along for the ride.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a super strong story or super strong script. It's definitely held together by those two guys. Nicolas Cage. I mean, why were people going to see this movie? It was all the hype around, and not that many people did actually go see it, sounds like, but it was the hype that Nicolas Cage was playing Dracula. And he goes in, when they first showed pictures of him in public without the beard.
I was so happy about that.
It was a bit of a shock because, again, we hadn't seen him without some kind of facial hair in a long time. And it was probably one of the more anticipated movies of his career in recent times. You know, we had like all that string of the 20 or however many movies like that he was doing to pay off tax debts or whatever it was, that were just whatever movies he could make money from. Right. So he's finally starting to come back up on a bit of a incline, a bit of a coming back, his comeback for whatever his fifth comeback. I think that's, people got hyped up about it. If it weren't for those two guys, though, Nicolas Cage and Nicholas Hoult, I don't think many people would have given a rip about this movie at all.
I think this is only the second vampire movie that we've talked about on this show. In general, do you gravitate towards vampire movies, or you kind of shy away from them?
I don't really. It's really neither. Like, I don't. There are some vampire movies that I like. Like, I really like Lost Boys.
Sure. I really like From Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah.
And I think there's maybe two or three more I could count on one hand that I really like that are straight vampire movies.
Yeah. I don't hate them, but I don't go seek them out generally unless I hear really good things about them.
For me, with this movie, like I try to go into every movie with as low as expectations as possible, because it's harder to be disappointed when you don't expect it.
Works out that way a little bit better.
Right. It's also why I try to avoid trailers. And being a UFC fan like you are, I really couldn't avoid trailers on this. Like you said, it was plastered all over the place. But I didn't really have high expectations for this to be like a modern take on like Dracula's story, because I don't really feel like it is. I feel like this is more of a modern take on like dealing with abusive relationships, and Dracula happens to be there. But seeing those pictures that you mentioned of Nick Cage when he was in the purple suit and he was all ghostly pale and white, I got excited more so because it was like, oh, it looks like they're paying attention to what Dracula should look like, to what this kind of content should be. And I didn't get into the mindset of like, I think this is going to be Nick Cage, chewing scenery and being, Dracula God Part 3 or whatever. But I still feel like somehow, even as great as he was in this, I just felt let down by this movie.
And to bring up, pull back the curtain a little bit, we had talked about watching this and talking about it months ago, like when it came out, because we were expecting that there was going to be a lot of talk about it. And it just kind of fell through the cracks because we had other stuff going on. But I mean, I do remember. It didn't
help that Evil Dead came out like 2 weeks after this and pretty much killed any momentum that it might have had.
Yeah, but I do think that when it was announced, or when we knew it was coming somewhere to streaming that you could watch it, we were both pretty into talking about it. It just, like I said, just kind of fell through the cracks. But yeah, it is hard to, with all the marketing really did turn me off personally. I was a little less into seeing it just because it was talked about so much. It's almost like And not to say, I don't think this is a bad movie by any means, but I feel like when a movie is pushed that hard, there is something, it feels like there's something wrong. You know, if it's being pushed that hard,
Yeah.
there's something that they're trying to do to make you want to go see it because it's not going to stand on its own merit. That's just how I think.
Well, if you think about when this came out too, which if I remember right was right in early April, you're kind of getting ahead of all the big summer movies. It's almost like a little lull there, like you're trying to just catch whatever spark you can. I don't know. If this movie came out now, I like between Barbie and Oppenheimer, there's no way that people would give a shit about this movie.
No, this would die on the vine.
More so.
with the stuff that's out now.
So yeah, anything you want to add, or do we want to kind of break into hot dogs with this and do our question of the week?
Yeah, let's just get into that because I feel like there's not really much else we can really dissect about this movie without getting super just into the weeds about nothing.
Well, that's half the problem is there's not enough to dissect with it. So
yeah.
All right, I'll go ahead and lead us off this time. I don't know who did last time, but what the hell? This movie for me is a solid five CGI bloods topped hot dogs out of 10. Truthfully, this movie for me is saved by Nicolas Cage. I think I've said that like 20 times now in this episode. It is his mannerisms, even when we get to the climax of the movie or the third act where they're dealing with the issue of Dracula, like just the way his mannerisms are and the way he portrays this character, that alone is worth the price of admission for me, even if he's only in maybe a quarter of the movie. Screen time wise, that's probably about right, quarter to a third, somewhere in that area. He is Nick Cage as Dracula and he nails it. Nicholas Hoult is fine. He doesn't, for me personally, do anything that puts him over the top in this, but he's not bad either. The story's lackluster, the effects piss me off, and the action sequences are just the same thing that I've seen a million times in 50 other movies over the past couple of years. So if you're going to watch it, this is the perfect candidate for a movie to say, go stream this. Don't go out of your way to pay a whole lot of money to watch it. Just stream it, watch it once, enjoy Nick Cage, and then eat some popcorn and move on with your afternoon.
All right. I feel like I like this movie considerably more than you did. Not to say that's going to, not going to say that's going to give it like a 10 out of 10 or anything, but it follows the buddy cop formula. It marketed itself, like we had talked earlier, as more of a horror comedy. I didn't realize that this was going to be an action film at all. I thought it was going to be horror comedy, just because that's how it was marketed. I feel like it checks boxes for those for more the action crowd than any other thing, but I thought the comedy was serviceable. It clearly doesn't take itself too seriously. They play that whole codependency angle throughout the whole movie. A lot of the major plot point of this movie is the codependency between Renfield, Dracula, the support group, their abusers, I guess. Nick Cage plays a convincing Dracula, if not looking a little jowly most of the time. I think because all those different kind of, I don't know, elements of the movie, it can span a few different fan bases. I would say, again, if you're not an Awkwafina fan, you're probably not going to want to watch this movie, but I would give it 6.5 arm javelins out of 11 hot dogs. I thought that I wasn't really put off by the digital blood. I mean, you can tell that's what it is right off the bat, but it wasn't anything that really like turned me away. The only minor nitpick that I have about it is the thing that we brought up where blood splatters everywhere, but it's nowhere at the same time. It's like it just sinks into the ground, or it gets sucked into whatever it hits. It never really makes an impact either way. And it's everywhere. Like there are scenes where there's just buckets, just gallons and torrents of blood just flying all over the place. And it never goes anywhere. It's just gone.
I forgot to mention that I do really enjoy that Nick Cage Dracula gets irrationally pissed off when he sees the crest of a church on a book. I thought that was pretty great. So
hates the church,
as one should. So all right, Question of the week. So we had a pretty simple question of the week. It goes along with the theme of this episode, which is Renfield / Dracula. Our question was very simply, who is your favorite Dracula? So I'm going to start on Instagram because that's where we got the most, or not Instagram, Twitter. We'll do Instagram in a second, where we got the most feedback on this. I'm going to go through them kind of quick because apparently when we ask a direct question like involving Dracula or Tom Atkins, that's when people want to respond. So first off, we have a response from Taproom Tabby, who is with the Gray's Taproom podcast, which I will be a guest on next week talking about a creepy movie. So check them out if you're not already. Follow them on all the social medias and follow their podcast. But she simply included a GIF of Bela Lugosi, and there's really no way you can be wrong with that answer. It's about as classic as you get. Scrolling through, bottom left of the midden, who runs a food blog and is on Twitter, said Nicolas Cage. I'm partial though because he's one of my favorite actors and he can do no wrong. I'm not arguing that. Our friends over at Listen to Their Screams podcast also said Bela Lugosi. Let's see. Movies for Days, another amazing podcast that you can follow on Twitter. Said a toss up between Klaus and Leslie Nielsen, two separate wonderful vampires. Molly X Macabre said, if it's not Christopher Lee, it's absolutely Gary Oldman. She's got another great account that's worth following on Twitter for sure. Cinema Trip Reviews said, the great Sir Christopher Lee. I really do enjoy his portrayal of Dracula, especially, I think it's Dracula in 1972, maybe it's 73, where he's running around England killing hippies. That's a pretty good one. I mean, hippie vampires, right? So, Nicole at Nicole Vampire X also said Bela Lugosi. And then the Well-Adjusted Horror podcast said, it's definitely my old man. I'm assuming this is Gary Oldman. It's hard to tell in this GIF. And then we have one more that is on Twitter, which is from our friend Podcast in the Woods from Boomer, who will be our guest on our next episode featuring the movie Intruder. He says it's got to be Nick Cage as Dracula, the most fun version, and yet he still manages to be so charismatic as well. Probably because he's Nick Cage, which is a good response too. Switching over to Instagram. So we had in the chat, we have Average Drewski. You can follow his YouTube channel, which is at Average Drewski. He said Bram Stoker's Dracula, but followed closely by a movie that I have the feeling we're going to have to talk about in an episode because I read the cast, like the character list on this, include characters like Hooker and Mayonnaise Man. So it's a movie called A Polish Vampire in Burbank. So yeah,
is that Bram Stoker?
Bram Stoker was his first choice, but A Polish Vampire in Burbank is the second choice, which is not his name is Bram Stoker.
Bram Stoker.
No. No. Our friend BP over at Let's Talk. Yes. Our friend BP over at Let's Talk Horror said the first thing that comes to mind is Duncan Regier as Dracula from the Monster Squad. He's badass. Absolutely agree with that. He calls a child a bitch in that movie, so it's hard to argue that. Then, more so than my answer, my favorite answer, Jordana over at Pretty Killer Podcast, she gave 3 responses, but her last one's the best. She had Bela Lugosi and Adam Sandler, both good answers, but the best answer she gave is Jason Segel. She's referring to the end scene in the movie Forgetting Sarah Marshall, where he plays the Dracula musical, which is easily the best thing under the Judd Apatow umbrella is the Dracula musical. So I'm going to take a break from talking for 20 seconds. Sean, what is your favorite Dracula?
I'm a little insulted. You think my answer is only going to be 20 seconds long? Are we talking like Dracula, the character, or just vampires?
The question was Dracula, but I whatever you want to talk about.
Well, I'll first will be my favorite vampire. My favorite vampire is Colin Robinson from What We Do in the Shadows. Are you familiar with Colin Robinson?
I'm familiar with the show, but I haven't watched it. So it's on
He's an energy vampire.
It's my never-ending to watch list.
He's an energy vampire, and he gets his strength from boring people, which I think is an awesome vampire power.
How many seasons is that show?
Oh, I think it's like 4 or 5.
Maybe
I
I'll
think.
start powering through that and we can do an episode about that because that will make me watch it. So
It's on Hulu.
yeah.
And technically not Dracula, but Nosferatu from Nosferatu, played by Max Schreck in 1922, would be my pick. That seeing that character the first time and several times after that, it's such a creepy like get up, costume, makeup, whatever it is it's just it gives me the creeps. Like not so much now, but as a younger person, that would freak me out quite a bit. If I had to go just straight up Dracula, it would definitely be Bela Lugosi.
So my favorite Dracula is very without a real challenger. Nick Cage would be the closest challenger, but it is Leslie Nielsen in Dracula Dead and Loving It. I thoroughly enjoy the humor of Mel Brooks, and I think the Dracula Dead and Loving It spoof movie is one of his most underrated movies. And I really don't care about the rest of the movie. Well, I do, because I like the entire movie. It's also a movie with a pretty good Renfield in it. But I enjoy more than anything when Dracula comes out in the sun because he's having a daymare, and he proclaims to Renfield, "Renfield, I'm fine. I'm drinking wine and eating chicken." And I think that's great. So then he burns himself.
I don't know. I
That's all I
couldn't
got.
get Leslie Nielsen after a while. As he got like really old and senile, I couldn't
He looked
laugh
the
at that
same
guy.
for like 50 years.
Yeah, no, he didn't look any different, but maybe mentally feeble is more appropriate. I couldn't deal with that.
I don't know. I enjoyed that movie. Maybe it's a nostalgia thing. Probably. I don't care. I liked it. So, do we got anything in the chat going on that we want to hit on? Let's see.
I kind of answered it as we went through it.
Okay. Well, fuck the chat then. So,
No,
anything
don't
you
say
want to?
that.
Fine. Don't fuck the chat. So, anything you want to hit on before we start wrapping on this one?
No, just wanted to say if you want your answers answered, if you want your answers read on the podcast, do that. Answer the question of the week. We'll read it. Unless it's really long or you give your top 50 favorite things. Because you can't have 50 favorites. Sorry.
We still read those answers sometimes. It happens.
Yeah, we just laugh at you and we don't put it in the podcast.
That's true. So, if you want to answer some of those questions, you can answer those questions on Twitter, where I'm currently seeing a picture of Darcy Prince's boobs flash across the screen. So that's interesting. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on Instagram, Threads, Facebook, TikTok, which I don't usually post the question there. Pretty much wherever there is social media, if we're on it, it is at Dewey Pod Monster. We try to cast a pretty wide net because some of these questions we don't get a lot of answers on. So help us get more interactive with you by following us on social media and all that good stuff. You can also follow us at crap.town. We don't usually put the question of the week on there, but all our previous episodes are on there, like our other vampire episode for Near Dark. I don't think we have another vampire other than that, unless I'm forgetting it. Maybe not. Let us know. Let us know in the comments of this episode if we did other vampire episode than this in Near Dark. And then go follow Sean wherever Sean wants you to follow him.
Yeah, I was just going to say before that, we're thinking of doing some live watch casts. So if anybody's interested in that, leave us comments. Let us know if that's something you'd be interested in. We've kind of been working on it in the background. But other than that, if you want to follow the crap that I do, you can check me out at youtube.drafttherapy.com. At one time in my life, I was reviewing a lot of beers. We were talking about Michigan beer. We were talking Michigan breweries. And some of those people don't want to talk to us anymore. So you can watch all the old shit at youtube.drafttherapy.com. You can also find me on all the social media networks at Draft Therapy. And maybe I'll answer some of the stuff that you ask me there. I don't know. Maybe
we're going to start drinking beer and doing stuff with that again at some point here. We just need to find time to be able to do it.
We need people to answer us when we email them. So
yeah, behind the curtain, this has been a pretty chaotic week up for both of us. So we're getting there. But anyway, bitch. That's all we do. So is that all we got?
Yeah, that's all I got. Thanks everybody for watching.
Yeah, thanks everyone for watching. We will be back. Are we going to do live? We're doing live on Monday, right?
Sure.
Okay. So If you want, you can watch us same YouTube time, same YouTube place. Well, not the same time. We'll be on Monday night at 10 o'clock. We'll be talking about the movie Intruder with Boomer from the Podcast in the Woods. Said podcast too many times there, but it is going to be a good time. That is a very great schlocky movie. If you want to watch it ahead of that and kind of see what we're seeing, know what we're talking about, assuming that you haven't seen it, it is currently available on Tubi for free. All hail Tubi. Go check it out and then, interact with us as we talk about it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all I got.
Sayonara, butt face.
Bam.